location at Walmart on Paul Street, Champlain, DF, we have Corey Michaud going over the Constitutional Act.
Section 91 of the Constitutional Act declares the federal government has the power to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Canada in relation to all matters not coming within classes of subjects by this act assigned exclusively to legislatures of the province. It also provides the power to deal with matters left out of the division of power, the peace, order, and the good government clause. It also provides powers to deal with matters having national dimensions. An example of such powers are used during emergency situations, as in war and global catastrophe. The War Measures Act provides the power to wage war and pass legislation with respect to munitions production, wages, and conscription. It implemented rent controls during World War II and were held valid for 5 years afterwards. Use of the peace, order, and good government power unrelated to war or insurrection was implemented during the economic emergency following a period of inflation in the 1970s. The federal government used this power to bring wage and price controls. Since then, it has been replaced with the Emergencies Act, which provides similar, more controlled powers, also provides for internal emergencies, and incorporates safeguards, making the abuse of these powers much less likely. If a matter becomes a concern of the whole country, the federal government may have the power to deal with it through this clause. An example of such would be an epidemic, which would become a national health crisis. The federal government would have the power to deal with the matters of national concern, even though it may have seemed local.
Okay guys, we're gonna learn about the Constitution Act of 1867. The division of powers, right outside of Walmart. The division of government's power is an important aspect of Canadian constitutional law. They're separated by federal and provincial. This gives the authority to pass certain legislation in Section 91 and 92 of the Constitutional Act. The Peace, Order, and Good Government Clause ensures there are no gaps in the law within federal and provincial powers. If there is an overlap of governmental powers, there could be a conflict. If a conflict does arise, the courts may be required to interpret the matter.
There are some types of legislation that are overlapping between two different levels of government and can be passed by either one or both. Some laws are covered both by federal and provincial legislations. Subsection 92A3 gives provinces power to handle the export of natural resources, but the power ultimately lies with the federal legislation on trade and commerce. Some other areas of concurrent jurisdiction are old age, pensions, agriculture, and immigration.
Since Confederation, the overwhelming subject matter for litigation in the area of constitutional law, at least until 1982, and the passage of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, dealt with the distribution of powers between the federal and provincial governments, as set out in the Constitution Act of 1867. In order to determine the validity of a statute, the court must first characterize the law. They must decide if it's consumer credit, tort liability, insurance regulation, real estate, transportation, or broadcasting. Secondly, the court must determine the true nature of the legislation in accordance with sections 91 and 92. Determining the true nature of the legislation also determines its validity. If the level of government that was assigned that particular head of power passed the statute, then it is valid.